la palabra. Señora Schaake.
Thank you so much, Chair, for this opportunity to share the experiences we had as a delegation from this subcommittee, which I think could not have come at a more crucial time. Of course, this Parliament has consistently spoken out about our concerns with regard to the rule of law, respect for human rights, etc., etc. And there has been plenty of reason over the last couple of years. And I think it was very clear during our visit that the Parliament stands out as conveying a different message, one of more concern and criticism than, for example, the European Commission and the Council, particularly after the so-called deal on migration was made. Our focus was therefore on broadly the rule of law and human rights, but also specifically on press freedom, the situation of refugees, and within the context of the situation of refugees, particularly that of women and children, because they are the majority of these refugees. And we also looked at the fallout of the fight between the terrorist group PKK and the Turkish troops, which has disproportionate impact on civilians. And we heard that approximately 500,000 of them are already internally displaced, which is perhaps a message that does not always come across here in the EU, but is certainly important. During our two-day visit, which was packed, reflecting our ambitions, we spoke with international organizations, people working with refugees, from UNICEF to UNHCR to the World Food Programme and Turkish organizations. We also spoke with NGOs from Turkey, focusing on human rights and refugees, as well as international NGOs that are working on the ground. We had the opportunity to speak with an academic who lost her job after signing a petition. We met with representatives of 3 Turkish ministries on the level of a deputy minister. We met with the Turkish Grand National Assembly's Human Rights Committee, so our equivalent, led by an AK party parliamentarian, and we met with the main political groups in the parliament, including, and this was quite remarkable, with the HDP, and the leader of the HDP on the day during which there was a debate in the Turkish parliament about lifting the immunity of parliamentarians. This has since taken place. A block vote on lifting the immunity of parliamentarians has led to a situation where 130 parliamentarians can see cases against them, and this includes 50 out of the 59 members of the HDP party, which I'm just reminding for colleagues represent mostly the Kurdish people in Turkey. And so this was a very critical moment in the parliamentary debate. It was also the week before the AK party Congress would elect a new leader, who is now the new Prime Minister of Turkey. Another key topic for us during the visit was press freedom, of course, of major concern for years, including on the internet. We met with journalists of 3 newspapers and had the opportunity to meet with Can Dündar, the journalist who was convicted to 5 years in prison. He's awaiting his appeal. He's convicted because he published a story that allegedly had leaks of state secrets. And he also faced an attack on his life on the day that this sentence was passed. So very crucial time again in Turkey. I'll just conclude with some main takeaways that I think we in the Parliament at this moment in time need to be very much aware of. We also met, I should add, with the Ombudsman, which kind of underlines the point that I'm about to make. In some cases, on paper, laws are in place. For example, the institution of the Ombudsman exists. But oftentimes, the letter of the law is not the same as the respect for the law. And we see a high level of arbitrary application of the law, political influencing of how the law is enforced. We see a lack of a separation of powers, a lack of independence of the judiciary, and in fact, I think, a lack of institutional functioning in the way they are intended according to European standards. And so I think this deserves more of our attention, that we don't only look on paper which institutions, checks and balances and safeguards are in place, but really we look at the practice, and that is what our visit contributed to. it is clear that press freedom and, in fact, polarization throughout society has led to extraordinary tensions between institutions, between people and institutions, and, in fact, I would feel safe to say that there is a climate of fear among a lot of people in the country. I think the discussion on the changes with regard to the anti-terror legislation are going to be extremely important from a human rights point of view, in the sense that changes in the anti-terror legislation in Turkey are part of the requirements agreed between the EU and Turkey in 2013. Both parties agreed, I want to underline, on a set of reforms that would be necessary to meet the requirements for visa liberalization. And the reason why this has now come up in a fast track, one could say, is because of the so-called deal on migration, of which visa liberalization is an element, and for which we still need to see the changes in the anti-terror legislation. Now, of course, a lot is at stake, and some people may argue that the deal needs to go through no matter what. But I just want to point out to colleagues that one of the key things we noticed during this visit is that precisely the anti-terror legislation is used to target critics and to use, let's say, more excessive allegations because national security is at stake, because anti-terror legislation is invoked. And so this is not only a relevant discussion for the violence in the southeast, which should be of great concern to all of us with regard to the situation in Turkey, with regard to potential new refugee flows, and with regard to the broader tensions in the Middle East, but also because the anti-terror legislation is used to stifle criticism at a time where I believe it would be better for people in Turkey if there would be a more vibrant, free and lively public debate to ensure that the political changes that are made are indeed supported by the population, and so that democracy means more than one man, one vote. I'll end there to be short, but if any colleagues are interested in more information, I'm sure my colleagues and I are happy to share, because it was certainly an impactful visit.